Welcome, folks. After long last, we have finally brought back the Cooper Matrix. And folks, I just wanted to thank those of you who have rode through the mysterious situation that we're in right now, where as you know, Delinquent Studios has been mysteriously restricted for a couple of months from doing live streams due to some sort of report that I can't seem to figure out. But no matter. We're going to be working things back, and hopefully the lighting's better right now. I think it is. I'm seeing myself. Hopefully the lighting is a lot better at this particular point. But I want to create a theme here. I want to create a mood. Don't want it too bright, too studio-y. I just kind of wanted that right length of, just darkness, because we're talking about some pretty wild out stuff here. So let's see where we are. Okay, so I think where we start here, so we don't wait. I think I've already taken the oath. I think I already showed you the oath, which is chapter 3. Which I've already taken the oath, and so that was sort of like my own little spin on it, where I kind of gave you the oath first, and then we kind of went into everything that breaks down into why this oath was made. So as we move forward with this, we have the Secret Treaty of Verona. Okay, 1916. Oh, and by the way, folks, I want to say this, that unlike other conversations, videos, whatever, about William Cooper or Behold a Pale Horse, this is not to defend. This is not to, to just sit here and preach and say that this is the gospel. This is basically me being willing to read through it, review it again, and place it into today's society so that you can see exactly how a book that was written, a couple of decades ago is still relevant today. So again, to continue, 1916 Congressional Record Senate. Mr. Owen, I wish to put in the record the Secret Treaty of Verona on November 22nd, 1822, showing what this ancient conflict is between the rule of the few and the rule of the many. I wish to call the attention of the Senate to this treaty because it is the threat of this treaty which was the basis of the Monroe Doctrine. It throws a powerful white light upon the conflict between the monarchical government and the government by the people. The Holy Alliance, under the influence of Metternich, the Premier of Austria, in 1822, issued this remarkable secret document. American Diplomatic Code, 1778 to 1884. The undersigned, specially authorized to make some additions to the Treaty of the Holy Alliance after having exchanged their respective credentials, have agreed as follows. Article 1. The high contracting powers, being convinced that the system of representative government is equally as incompatible with the monarchical principles as the maxim of the sovereignty of the people with the divine right, engage mutually in the most solemn manner to use all their efforts to put an end to the system of representative governments in whatever country it may exist in Europe, and to prevent its being introduced into those countries where it is not yet known. Article 2. As it cannot be doubted that the liberty of the press is the most powerful means used by the pretended supporters of the rights of the nations to the detriment of those of princes, the high contracting parties promise reciprocally to adopt all proper measures to suppress it, not only in their own states, but also in the rest of Europe. Article 3. Convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes. The high contracting parties declare it to be their intention to sustain in their respective states those measures which clergy may adopt with the aim of ameliorating their own interests, so immediately connected with the preservation of the authority of the princes, and the contracting powers join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them, and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. Article 4. The situation of Spain and Portugal unite unhappily all the circumstances to which this treaty has particular reference. The high contracting parties, in confiding to France the care of putting an end to them, engaged to assist her in the manner which may the least excuse me, which may the least compromise them, their own people, and the people of France by means of a subsidy on the part of the two empires of 20 million francs every year from the date of the signature of this treaty to the end of the war. Article 5. In order to establish in the peninsula the order of things which existed before the revolution of Cadiz, and to ensure the entire execution of the articles of the present treaty, the high contracting parties give to each other the reciprocal assurance that as long as their views are not fulfilled, rejecting all other ideas of utility and other measures to be taken, they will address themselves with the shortest possible delay to all the authorities existing in their states and to all their agents in foreign countries, with the view to establish connections tending toward the accomplishment of the objects proposed by this treaty. This treaty, Article 6, this treaty shall be renewed with such changes as the new circumstances may give occasion for, either at a new Congress or at the court of one of the contracting parties, as soon as the war with Spain shall be terminated. Article 7. The present treaty shall be ratified and the ratifications exchanged at Paris within the space of 6 months, made at Verona the 22nd November 1822, for Austria, Metternich, for France, Chateaubriand, for Prussia, Bernstedt, for Russia, Nesselrode. Mr. Owen, I ask to have printed in the congressional record this secret treaty because I think it ought to be called now to the attention of the people of the United States and the world. This evidence of the conflict between the rule of the few versus popular government should be emphasized on the minds of the people of the United States, that the conflict now waging throughout the world may be more clearly understood, for after all, said the great pending war springs from the weakness and frailty of the government by the few, where human error is far more probable than the error of the many, where aggressive war is only permitted upon the authorizing vote of those whose lives are jeopardized in the trenches of modern war. Mr. Shafroth. Mr. President, I should like to have the senators state whether in that treaty there was not a coalition formed between the powerful countries of Europe to reestablish the sovereignty of Spain and the republics of South and Central America. Mr. Owen, I was just going to comment upon that, and I am going to take but a few moments to do so because I realize the pressure of other matters. This Holy Alliance, having put a Bourbon prince upon the throne of France by force, then used France to suppress the Constitution of Spain immediately afterwards, and by this very treaty gave her a subsidy of 20 million francs annually to enable her to wage war upon the people of Spain and prevent their exercise of any measure of the right of self-government. The Holy Alliance immediately did the same thing in Italy by sending Austrian troops to Italy, where the people there attempted to exercise a like measure of liberal constitutional self-government, and it was not until the printing press, which the Holy Alliance so stoutly opposed, taught the people of Europe the value of liberty, and finally, that one country after another seized a greater and greater right of self-government, until now it may be fairly said that nearly all the nations of Europe have a very large measure of self-government. However, I wished to call upon the attention of the Senate and the country of this important history in the growth of constitutional popular self-government. The Holy Alliance made its powers felt by the wholesale drastic suppression of the press in Europe, by universal censorship, by killing free speech and all ideas of popular rights, and by the complete suppression of popular government. The Holy Alliance, having destroyed popular government in Spain and in Italy, had well laid plans also to destroy popular government in the American colonies, which had revolted from Spain and Portugal in Central and South America under the influence of the successful example of the United States. It was because of this conspiracy against the American republics by the European monarchies that the great English statesman Canning called the attention of our government to it. And our statesmen then, including Thomas Jefferson, took an active part to bring about the declaration by President Monroe in his next annual message to the Congress of the United States that the United States would regard it as an act of hostility to the government of the United States and an unfriendly act if this coalition or if any power of Europe ever undertook to establish upon the American continent any control of any American republic or to acquire any territorial rights. This is the so-called Monroe Doctrine. Under the threat under the secret treaty of Verona, excuse me, once again, that was a lie, folks. This is the so-called Monroe Doctrine. The threat under the secret treaty of Verona to suppress popular government in the American republics is the basis of the Monroe Doctrine. This secret treaty sets forth clearly the conflict between the monarchical government and popular government and the government of the few as against the government of the many. It is in part in reality of developing popular sovereignty when we demand for women equal rights to life, to liberty, and to the possession of property, to an equal voice in the making of the laws and the administration of the laws. This demand on the part of the women is made by men, and it ought to be made by men as well as by thinking progressive women, as it will promote human liberty and human happiness. I sympathize with it, and I hope that all parties will in the national conventions give their approval to this larger measure of liberty to the better half of the human race. Author's note. This is from William Cooper himself. Again, anyone who believes that the monarchs, after being deposed, forgave and forgot is not playing with a full deck. What he means is arrogant monarchical rule will never get over the fact that their rule was taken over or shut down. They will never get over that. And they will always seek for a way, if possible, with the, with the easiest, most effective strategy possible, they will look to get that rule back. They will always seek for it. Most of these families are wealthy beyond belief and may be more powerful today than when they sat upon thrones. Today, they are known collectively as the Black nobility. Just because the secret treaty of Verona was signed in 1822 does not mean that the treaty is void. It is imperative that you realize privately the Black nobility refuses to ever recognize any government other than their own inherited and divine right to rule. They will work diligently behind the scenes to cause conditions whereby they might regain their crowns. They believe that the United States belongs to England. So again, folks, there's a lot riding on this. There's a lot riding on the Monroe Doctrine, the so-called Monroe Doctrine. There were people here that wanted to see that human happiness and human liberty, all humans, male and female, were seen to. That men should also want this for women. Should stand alongside of thinking progressive women and should want these equal rights. And then we also have the mention in the emergence of the Black nobility. Again, folks, a part of the Revolutionary War and things like this was about escaping from colonized England rule, UK, British rule. This was about. And this doctrine was to make sure that any that because because a lot of the people that came here are descended from England, they're still, they're still connected to England, but basically wanted to try to make sure that England, or rulers, kings, and kings, duchesses, whatever, did not try to establish territorial rights, over the American republics. This is something that is still England is still England is still connected to the United States in a lot of different ways. If you need an example, Israel. Okay, the British mandated Palestine. We have Israel that grew, that continues to colonize and occupy and squeeze out Palestinians in the country that they've lived in. And so, folks, we still have, even back at that time, there was rule to see women have equal rights, to see women have equal say in the laws that are made, to have people speak and govern their own, their own states, to decide whether war is necessary because it's going to affect them directly. The population, the people, the numbers that they have, they're going to be the ones that are going to step out and fight this war. So they should be the ones to decide whether it is worth it to go out there and fight said war. So these, among other things, are very much of what's happening here. But what you have to understand on the outsiders with the Black nobility and others is that the women do not care. The women being treated a certain way as far as the general population means nothing to those women who stand part of the Black nobility, who stand part of the Bilderberg group. It means nothing to them. They don't care. They don't care how women are manipulated and used to further the division. They don't care. Anything to keep division, anything to keep the people distracted, they will use. So whether it's gender wars, whether it's race wars, whether it's age wars, if they'll always use patriotism, they'll always use something. Religion, whatever. Religion versus non-religious, different religious sects. They'll always use something to keep you distracted and divided. Well, here we go to chapter 5 here, folks. Goodbye, USA. Hello, New World Order. Backbone of hidden government, subversion of the balance of power, the plan to suspend the Constitution and declare martial law. It could probably, okay. It could probably be shown by facts and figures that there is no distinctly Native American criminal class except Congress. Mark Twain, 1885. So this, folks, just look at the connection here. This is roughly about 60 years after the Treaty of Verona. And I'm not sure. Let me check of the Monroe Doctrine. Oh, this was 1916. Okay. 1885. So in the midst of all this, between these things, you've had people like even a great writer like Mark Twain letting you know that he thinks very little of the government. The balance of power. Let's see where we are here, okay? When our forefathers wrote the Constitution of these United States, they provided safeguards against despotism by providing a balance of power. The Constitution was set up to provide clear divisions of legislative, judicial, and executive powers. It was believed that this system would ensure that if one branch got out of hand, the other two would act to keep the one in check. This balance of power was predicated upon the assumption that none of the three branches could or would infringe upon the power of the others. The Constitution is clear on the functions of each of the branches. The legislative will make the laws. The judicial will interpret the law. The executive will decide the policy and enforce the law. This, of course, is the simplest of explanations, but this is not a textbook on government. My intent is to acquaint you with the simple basics of the balance of power so that you can then understand how it has been subverted. Legislative, Congress in the form of the House and Senate is required to publish the laws that are made, and this is done in the Congressional Record and the Federal Register. Pending or passed legislation can be obtained by citizens through their congressmen or from the government printing office. Citizens cannot be held responsible for the law if it is not made available to them. It is paradoxical that the government body most representative of the American citizen is the one that has been the most easily subverted through PACs, payoffs, pork barrel politics, professional politicians, congressmen who are members of secret societies, and through greed and fear, our representatives and senators quit representing us long ago. Congress has tremendous powers but fails in most cases to exercise even a token amount. How is it that our legislative has allowed and at times encouraged the executive branch to write law? You probably did not know that the president and others in the executive branch of the government can and do write law. This is done in the form of presidential executive orders, National Security Council memos, National Security Decision Directives, and National Security Directives. NSC memos were broad policy papers in the days after passage of the National Security Act. NSC memos have become narrower and more specific over the years, and the name has varied. Under Kennedy, they were called National Security Action Memorandums. President Bush has changed the name to National Security Directives. There is a tremendous difference between presidential executive orders, NSC memos, and National Security Decision Directives. Presidential executive orders are listed in the Federal Register or presidential findings, which are made known to the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. The most important difference between the presidential executive orders and all of the others, no matter what they are called, is that the others do not have to be reported, reviewed, or made available to anyone, or even acknowledge that they exist. Now, with that being said, folks, let's take a little commercial break and speak on and get a word from our sponsor, which is, of course, 7 Day. That's 7 Day on YouTube, 7 Day Productions, and 7 Day on Instagram, as well as the real 7 Day on Twitter. You can also go to 7dayisland.com/beats to check out some very affordably, almost steal prices on beats, music tracks. You can possibly even speak on getting some production help. You need a good producer that can hunker down in there, really get it gritty and really get it done for you in an efficient time. Check out 7 Day, folks. 7dayisland.com. And for those looking for beats, so looking to jump on, buy some beats and get going, 7day.com/beats. 7dayisland.com/beats. Let's just take a moment here. Well, welcome back, folks. Well, thank you for waiting around. Again, that was just a couple of samples from my creative collaborative partner, 7Day. Again, you can check him out on YouTube, Instagram. You can also check him out on his website. You can also check him out on his website, 7dayisland.com. For those looking for beats, once again, that's 7dayisland.com/beats. Check out those affordable prices, listen to those incredible beats, and definitely get on, man. It's time to start getting some money. You know, the more money we make, the more money we generate as a team, the more the better production we can bring, the better things, the better content that we can bring, the more fervent content we can bring, the more available, the more here we can be. So it's time to start, supporting and everything like that, folks. Let's see. So back to it. There is no oversight whatsoever that can maintain a check on the legality of these national security directives. The president and others within the executive branch have used these super secret directives to skirt the balance of power and write law without anyone's knowledge. Justification of the president's power to write law through executive orders stems from the failure of the government to rescind the declaration of martial law during the Civil War. In effect, the United States has been under martial law ever since Lincoln's administration. These NSDs are powerful, hidden, and dangerous tools. They were prolific during the Reagan administration. Over 300 were written, with no more than 50 ever leaking out to undergo public scrutiny. Yet most Americans have never heard of these subversive weapons. They are being used to destroy our Constitution. I believe that everyone should know about this corruption of government. Congress has turned a blind eye to these abuses of executive power. At 3:30 a.m. Sunday, August 4th, 1990. Wow, wasn't even in high school then, folks. The Senate made it even easier for the executive branch to subvert the Constitution and may have made George Bush the first American king. At that time, on that day, a minority of United States senators, maybe 10 at the most, passed Senate Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 1991. That's a that's Senate Senate Bill 2834. This bill will fundamentally change our constitutional system and threatens to destroy the very foundation of our great nation. Since attention has been focused upon the Middle East crisis, the public and most congressmen know absolutely nothing about this bill. The bill was fraudulently introduced as a reform to prevent future incidents of the abuses brought to light during the Iran-Contra scandal. Instead of preventing future abuses, however, it virtually authorizes essentially every abuse. The bill was carefully brought to a vote by Senator Sam Nunn in the dead of night when the opposition was gone. It effectively transfers most authority over to the United States government directly into the hands of George Bush and thus directly into the hands of the secret government. The president was given the power to initiate war, appropriate public funds, define foreign policy goals, and decide what is important to our national security. In oversight of intelligence activities, Title 7, State Bill 2834 authorizes the following. Gives the president power to initiate covert actions. This has never before been given to the president. Prevents Congress from stopping the president's initiation of covert actions. Allows the president to use any federal departments, agencies, or entities to operate or finance a covert operation. Empowers the president to use any other nation or private contractor or person to fund or operate a covert action. Redefines covert actions as operations necessary to support foreign policy objectives of the United States, a definition that is so vague and broad as to be essentially unlimited. For the first time, officially claims the right of the United States to secretly interfere in the internal, political, economic, or military affairs of other countries in direct and flagrant violation of international law. requires that the president prepare and deliver a written finding to the intelligence committees of the Congress, but allows the president to omit extremely sensitive matters and authorizes the president to claim executive privilege if Congress asks too many questions. There are no penalties in the bill for violating any of its provisions, including the provision requiring a finding. Why should there be? This bill has literally handed the power of all the branches of government to the president on a silver platter. President Bush is now truly an American king, George I. State Bill 2834 gives Bush the power to use any agency or branch of government Okay, so again, without going right back into this again, folks, and this act right here, once again, is known Senate Intelligence Authorization Act. I mean, folks, and you have to understand that every president that's gone on after George Bush has had this power and know they've had this power. And what they choose to do or not do with it, I mean, it's entirely up to them. Overall, they're figureheads, but I mean, there's been certain power that have been subverted directly to the president, which gives the president a lot of stroke. I mean, and also, while we look at it in a negative light, it also gives an opportunity to do a lot of good if he so chose. But let's keep going here. National security. Let me get this right here because that one was an NSDD. Let's see. Okay. National Security Directive National Security Decision Directive 84. Safeguarding national security information secrecy. May classified in full. Okay. Subject. This directive drastically expands restrictions on government employees' freedom of speech. Those with access to classified information were required to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Those with access to a special category of classified information were made to agree to pre-publication review of any further writings. The use of polygraphs was authorized. Purpose: prevent disclosure of information that could damage national security. Consequences: the polygraph requirement was rescinded due to congressional opposition. Secrecy restrictions were imposed on more than 4 million government employees and contractors from more than 50 executive agencies. Many reporters' contacts were shut down. Government employees, unions, and members of Congress sued to protect the rights of whistleblowers, and the Supreme Court recently sent the case back to the district level for review. Author's note: NSDD 84 indicates that John Lear, Robert Lazar, Bruce Maccabee, Stanton Friedman, Clifford Stone, and many others may be active government agents. They were all working in government jobs or for government contractors, and all of them were subject to this executive order. NSDD 84 was not used to silence them, which seems to indicate that they had executive approval in each and every instance. NSDD 17, deterring Cuban models, covert action in Nicaragua, November 23rd, 1981. The Central Intelligence Agency was given authority to create the Contras and work with foreign governments as appropriate to undermine the Sandinista government of Nicaragua. Purpose: to stop the flow of arms from Cuban and Nicaraguan sources to the Salvadorian rebels. Consequences: the CIA was given $19 million to assemble and arm a force of 500 Contras to join with 1,000 exiles already being trained by Argentina. Scores of operatives arrived in Honduras. Arms shipments from Miami began. The Contra War was set in motion. NSDD 77, Management of Public Diplomacy Relative to National Security, January 14th, 1983. Declassified in full. Subject: this directive set up several planning groups to conduct public diplomacy activities. It ordered organizational support for foreign governments and private groups to encourage the growth of democratic political institutions and practices. Purpose: to mobilize international and domestic support for our national security objectives. Consequence: created propaganda ministries in the National Security Council, the State Department, and the White House that concentrated on, in the words of the NSC staff member in charge of the program, gluing black hats on the Sandinistas and white hats on the UNO, the Contras United Nicaraguan Opposition. Stories were planted in the press. Journalists were pressured. The General Accounting Office later found that these activities violated the law banning covert propaganda inside the United States. How many other covert propaganda programs do you think are operating against the American citizens? I can assure you that there are many more than you would ever believe. Okay, folks. I'm going to take a moment to check on something. So again, let's and again, folks, want you to, as always, with our new sponsor, 7Day. That's 7Day Productions on YouTube, 7dayisland.com on the internet. Check them out. You need a producer, need an engineer, just need to buy some beats real quick to, to get your lyrics onto. This guy's a one-stop shop for all of that. Check them out, 7dayisland.com. Check out some samples on 7Day Productions on YouTube. Check him out on Instagram, folks. Check out his live tutorials. This is a guy that if you're doing some work, you're trying to get out there, with some beats that nobody's got, this is a guy you need in your corner. Here's another sample.
Grammarly does more than catch errors.
Let's see what else we got here, folks. Again, just in case you need to know, once again, that is 7dayisland.com. Check out the beats, /beats, if you want to check out those beats. You know what? I know I like to open and close with blonde terrorist attacks, with the Cooper Matrix, but that may be a nice little way to close out the Cooper Matrix. Once again, folks, for anybody looking to check out the man of our sponsor, 7Day, that is our sponsor. That is his music. His website is 7day.com, 7dayisland.com, excuse me. That's 7dayisland.com /beats if you need beats, production work, engineering. Contact this guy, 7dayisland.com. Check him out on YouTube with 7Day Productions. That's my that's our sponsor. That's also my creative collaborative partner. But back to it, folks. Okay. NSDD 138, international terrorism. April 3rd, 84. This directive endorsed the principle of preemptive strikes and retaliatory raids against terrorists and called on 26 federal agencies to recommend specific measures to combat terrorism. Purpose: to lessen international terrorism and free U.S. hostages in Lebanon. While this NSD directive pretends to be concerned about the international terrorism, it is really a thinly disguised authorization of preemptive strikes and retaliatory raids against patriots in this country. When FEMA is activated, patriots will be rounded up in the dead of night, most likely on a national holiday such as Thanksgiving. Government agents and law enforcement officers in every city across the nation have received anti-terrorist training under this NSDD directive, and I can assure you the target is patriots. Consequences: set up terrorist incident working group under North in the NSC. Its first major action was the interception and capture of the Achille Lauro hijackers, which gave North's career an important boost. And that's Oliver North, by the way. Either NSDD 138 or a subsequent NSD directive on terrorism authorized the training of 3 Lebanese units for preemptive strikes. When problems arose, Director of Central Intelligence William Casey took that operation off the books and enlisted Saudi Arabian help in an attempt to assassinate the head of Hezbollah. A resulting car bombing killed about 80 in Beirut. Sheikh Fadlallah, the target, was unhurt. The U.S. military, along with civilian law enforcement teams, conducted joint anti-terrorist training across America. To allay public fears, the participants wore civilian clothing. NSD directives have become the de facto legislative vehicle of the national security state. It has become known throughout the research of Susan Fitzgerald, a research consultant at the Fund for Constitutional Government in Washington, who has collected declassified NSD directives that many were released without the White House letterhead at the top of the page and without the president's signature at the bottom. This, she speculates, is to conceal the fact that the signatures on some of them would reveal that they have been made by AutoPen, not by Ronald Reagan's own hand. That should give you a taste of what we are up against. Please understand that virtually all but a very few NSD directives still remain classified. And unless the public forces disclosure, their effect will probably never be known. Somewhere within the volumes of secret NSD directives, there is a plan to suspend the Constitution of the United States of America. The existence of this plan surfaced during the Iran-Contra hearings, when Congressman Jack Brooks of Texas attempted to bring it into the open when he asked Colonel North directly if North had ever helped draft a plan to suspend the Constitution. Brooks was silenced by the committee chairman, Senator Daniel K. Inouye, Hawaii. Senator Inouye stated that the subject dealt with national security and any questions regarding the matter could be brought up during a closed-door session. We never learned the outcome. I would like to know who gave anyone in any branch of government with any title the right to suspend the Constitution at any time for any reason under any conditions. I believe the plan to suspend the Constitution is directly tied to the underground facility called Mount Weather and to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. Mount Weather is so shrouded in secrecy that 99.9% of Americans have never heard of it. FEMA, however, is another story. Remember Hurricane Hugo? Remember the federal agency? Remember the federal agency, FEMA, that was sent to handle the emergency and was thrown out by the citizens because of gross incompetence? I do. FEMA was incompetent because emergency management is just the guise for its real purpose, which is to take over local, state, and federal government in case of a national emergency. The only way FEMA could do such a thing is if the Constitution were suspended and martial law were to be declared. Therefore, its very existence is proof positive that a plan to suspend the government does, in fact, exist. Mount Weather, just outside of a sleepy little town called Bluemont, Virginia, about 46 miles west of Washington, D.C., is an area of wilderness covering what has been called the toughest granite rock in the eastern United States. The area is surrounded by signs marked restricted area, and this installation has been declared a restricted area. Unauthorized entry is prohibited. Other signs state all persons and vehicles entering hereon are liable to search. Photographing, making notes, drawings, maps, or graphic representations of this area or its activities is prohibited. Such material found in the possession of an unauthorized persons will be confiscated. Of unauthorized persons, not unauthorized persons. Internal Security Act of 1950. This installation is beneath the mountain, and its name is the Western Virginia Office of Controlled Conflict Operations. Its nickname is Mount Weather. It was ordered to be built by the Federal Civil Defense Administration, which is now the Federal Preparedness Agency. Mount Weather was designed in the early 50s as a part of a civil defense program to house and protect the executive branch of the federal government. The official name was the Continuity of Government Program. Congress has repeatedly tried to discover the real purpose of Mount Weather, but so far has been unable to find out anything about the secret installation. Retired Air Force General Leslie W. Bray, director of the Federal Preparedness Agency, told the Senate Subcommittee on Constitutional Rights in September 1975, "I am not at liberty to describe precisely what is the role and the mission and the capability that we have at Mount Weather or at any other precise location." In June 1975, Senator John Tunney of California, chairman of the subcommittee on the Constitutional Rights, charged that Mount Weather held dossiers on at least 100,000 Americans. He later alleged that Mount Weather computers, described as the best in the world, can obtain millions of pieces of additional information on the personal lives of American citizens simply by tapping the data stored at any of the other 96 federal relocation centers. I know from my stint with the Office of Naval Intelligence that these dossiers consist of information collected about American patriots, men and women who are most likely to resist the destruction of our Constitution and the formation of the totalitarian police state under the New World Order. The Patriot Data Bank is constantly updated so that when the appointed hour arrives, all patriots can be rounded up with little, if any, effort. The plan calls for this to be accomplished in the dead of night on a national holiday. Most likely holiday is Thanksgiving, when everyone, no matter the religion, race, or creed, will be at home. The targets will be ripe for the picking, and after a heavy meal, maybe some alcoholic beverages, and during a deep sleep. There is a traitor in the Patriot movement who provides the secret government with accurate names and addresses of patriots who will fight to protect and defend the Constitution. My recommendation is that no patriot should ever be at home or at the home of any family member on any holiday ever again until the traitors have been hung and the Constitution restored as the supreme law of the land. Some sources state that Mount Weather is virtually an underground city, complete with dormitories, private apartments, streets, sidewalks, cafeterias, hospitals, water purification systems, power plant, office buildings, a lake fed by fresh water from underground springs, a mass transit system, and many other astounding things. Several disturbing facts emerge when one researches Mount Weather. One is the conclusion that a complete parallel government exists at the site. 9 federal departments exist there: Agriculture, Commerce, HEW, HUD, Interior, Labor, State, Transportation, and the Treasury. Apparently, at least 5 federal agencies are also in residence: FCC, Selective Service, Federal Power Commission, Civil Service Commission, and the Veterans Administration. 2 privately owned corporations have offices at Mount Weather: the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Post Office. There is also an office of the presidency. What makes all this upsetting is that there is a president and a complete set of cabinet officers in residence at Mount Weather. Who are they and who appointed them? Where is such a thing provided for in the Constitution of the United States of America? Mount Weather is the operational center, the hub of over 96 other underground federal relocation centers scattered across the United States. The majority of these appear to be concentrated in Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina. Each of these facilities contains computer databanks holding information not on enemy agents and Soviet diplomats or suspected terrorists, but on American citizens and patriots. A list of other files kept at the facilities was furnished to the subcommittee. Why do I keep saying subcommittee? Let me calm down. Whew. We've accomplished quite a bit here, folks. Let's keep it going. Subcommittee. A list of other files kept at the facilities was furnished to the Subcommittee on Constitutional Rights in 1975. The list included military installations, government facilities, communications, transportation, energy and power, agriculture, manufacturing, wholesale and retail services, manpower, financial, medical, and educational institutions, sanitary facilities, population, housing, shelter, and stockpiles. The committee concluded that these databases operate with few, if any, safeguards or guidelines. Senator James Oborczyk of South Carolina. Senator James Oborczyk of South Dakota, a member of the subcommittee, said, "I feel the entire operation has eluded the supervision of either Congress or the courts." Chairman Tunney said, "Mount Weather is out of control. Nothing was done by Congress to rectify the situation, however, and Mount Weather remains out of control." Former high-level officials from Mount Weather agreed that the base at Mount Weather is much more than any standby government facility or storage center for the preservation of records. They describe it as an actual government in waiting. We do not merely store essential information. The facility attempts to duplicate the vital functions of the executive branch of the administration. We do not merely store essential information. The facility attempts to duplicate the vital functions of the executive branch of the administration. As stated above, according to my research, this includes a president and all cabinet members actually in residence. Protocol even demands that subordinates address them as Mr. President or Mr. Secretary. Most of these mysterious appointees have held their positions through several administrations. We just act on the orders of the president in national emergencies," once said one former Mount Weather official. The FPA, in its 1974 annual report, stated Studies conducted at Mount Weather involve the control and management of domestic political unrest, where the material shortages, such as food riots or in strike situations where the FPA determines that there are was I about to do that? Determines that there are industrial disruptions and other domestic resource crises. The report states that the bureaucracy at Mount Weather invokes what it calls civil crisis management. Officials who were at Mount Weather and who have furnished us with data say that during the 1960s, the complex was actually prepared to assume certain governmental powers at the time of the 1961 Cuban Missile Crisis and the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963. The source said that the installation used the tools of its civil crisis management program on a standby basis during the 1967 and 1968 urban riots and during a number of national anti-war demonstrations against the administration by the American people. Okay. Okay. Do apologize, folks. Daniel J. Cronin, who was the assistant director for the FPA, outlined a massive surveillance and manipulation program that is directed against the American population on a continuing basis. Hold on, 1 second, folks. We need a quick moment. Another break here from my great collaborative partner here. From my great collaborative partner and our sponsor and our commercial sponsor. Once again, 7day. That's 7dayisland.com. So let's see. Apologize, folks. Let's get back to it, shall we? Okay. Okay, Daniel J. Cronin, who was the assistant director for the FPA, outlined a massive surveillance and manipulation program that is directed against the American population on a continuing basis. The FPA has organized an impressive armament of resources and equipment. He cited that Renaissance satellites, local state police intelligence reports, and law enforcement agencies of the federal government as examples of the resources available to the FPA for information gathering. The only document that I was able to find that attempts to outline some of the statutory authority of Mount Weather is Executive Order 11490. It was drafted by General George A. Lincoln, former director for the Office of Emergency Preparedness, preceded FPA, the Federal Preparedness Agency, and was signed into law by President Nixon in October of 1969. Executive Order 11490 superseded Executive Order 11051, signed on October 2nd, 1962 by President Kennedy. Kennedy's order used the language, whereas national preparedness must be achieved, as may be required to deal with the increases in the international tension with limited war or with general war, including an attack upon the United States. Nixon's order began, whereas our national security is dependent upon our ability to assure continuity of government at every level in any national emergency type situation that might conceivably confront the nation. Nixon has deleted any reference to war, imminent attack, and general war from the order and replaced them with the phrase during any emergency that might conceivably occur. Nixon's order, which is the one in effect today, allows the government in the form of FEMA to suspend the Constitution for literally any reason they decide to call a national emergency. I cannot find a plan or executive order anywhere which outlines any procedure or allowance for the restoration of the Constitution after a national emergency has ended. This leads to the obvious conclusion that no restoration of the Constitution is contemplated or desired by those in power. In 1975, Senator Tunney expressed concern. We know from what we've heard in the press that 15,000 names were being maintained by the FBI for detention in an emergency. We also know that the IRS had its files on individual taxpayers. We know that the CIA had their Operation Chaos and that the NSA has had the records of conversations that have been intercepted electronically. My question is this. Is there anyone like yourself, General Bray, that is in control of the overall process, of the overall access to this data, if it is maintained in a relocation site? And your answer, as I understood it, is no, Tunney continued. General Bray, I must say that I still don't know who's in control of these relocation centers. You say you don't have that knowledge, and still we don't know from the three witnesses that we had here today that they had information as to who has control of those centers. I am not at liberty, Bray answered, to describe precisely what is the role and mission and capability that we have at Mount Weather or any other precise location. I firmly believe that our continuity of government program has not provided continuity at all, but has been the instrument for this continuing open and democratic government, and that the very program designed to protect Americans has actually been turned against us. We at the executive level here were active in either OSS, the State Department, or the European Economic Administration. During those times, and without exception, we operated under directions issued by the White House. We are continuing to be guided by such directives, the substance of which were to the effect that we should make every effort to so alter a life in the United States as to make possible a comfortable merger with the Soviet Union. H. Rowan Gaither, President of the Ford Foundation, 1953. And the sources here, folks, were bureaucrats get ready for a presidential order. Spotlight, Washington, D.C., July 27, 1987. Pell Eve, The Backbone of Hidden Government, The Nation, June 19, 1989. Richard P. Pollock, The Mysterious Mountain, The Progressive, March 12, 1976. Lanny Sinkin, Democracy at Risk If Covert Bill Passes. Another View, Los Angeles Daily News, September 19, 1990. Weekly compilation of presidential documents, Office of the Federal Register, National Archives and Records Administration, Washington, D.C., 1950 to present. Howard Witt, Lawyers Press U.S. on Martial Law Plan, Chicago Tribune, August 15, 1983. So again, folks, we're just about at 1:20. We made some good progress here. Chapter 6 is a doozy. A lot of pages here. Good few pages here before we get into chapter 7. And then chapter 7 doesn't seem to last long after that. So check this one out. I'll leave you with this. Are the sheep ready to shear? Oklahoma House Bill 1750, the test case for the police state. This is a good one to leave you with. Gary North recently wrote about one of the scariest pieces of socialistic police state legislation to arrive on the scene to date. On January 1st, 1991, a new 96-page state law goes into effect. House Bill 1750 passed last year, 1989, requires all Oklahoma residents to declare everything they own to the tax collector. Everything: guns, coins, art collections, furniture, business equipment, bank accounts, household furniture, etc. Forms will be distributed through banks. Any taxpayer who refuses to fill out the form and submit it to the tax assessor by March 15th, the Ides of March, will be visited by an assessor. He will ask permission to enter the home or place of business. If this request is denied, he will be issued a search warrant. Any property not previously listed or undervalued will be assessed a penalty of up to 20% of its market value. This will make renters into property taxpayers and make life easy for the gun grabbers. What are the investment implications of this? Invest in a good gun and be standing on your porch with gun in hand when they pay you a visit. It is clear where the tax collectors are headed next. Oklahoma will be a test case. If they can pull this one off, other states will follow. The big brother wants to know all and to tax all. Eventually, the New World Order will eliminate all private property, redistribute the wealth, and this inventory will tell them how much exists and exactly where it is stored. Of course, the Oklahoma tax assessor will share its information with other federal and state agencies. Will they get away with this blatant disregard for civil and constitutional rights? That is exactly the reason for the law, to find out if it will meet with strong or violent opposition. If the citizens of Oklahoma lie down and allow this to happen, then you can bet everyone else in the nation is going to be subjected to the same or similar law. It is time to stand up with a weapon and scream, "Enough!" It is time to draw the line. It is time to make decisions and carry them out. It is time to resist at any and all costs. The penalty for failing to do so is slavery. It is not time for rebellion. It is time for restoration. The Constitution must be again, as it once was, the supreme law of the land. Federalism is treason. Stand up and fight. House Bill 1750, legislation of the Oklahoma State of House of Representatives, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 1989. Gary North, Big Brother wants to see it all in Oklahoma. The McIlvaney Intelligence Advisor, July 1990. Think about that, folks. Hashtag no police state. Think about how this information plays into today's society. Think about how close we are to a police state. Just think about it, folks. Look up the National Security Decision Directives. Look up the executive orders. We will be giving you some information on the next one about exactly what those executive orders are. Once we get into chapter 6, the HR 4079 and FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, a tool that can be used to establish the police state. Okay? We'll be back pretty soon on that. And as promised, if I could find it. And as usual, folks, as I always say, definitely important. It's the most important when I do these. Stay woke, stay wary. Handle your business. Stay alert, folks. Information is key. Stay on it. Always, folks. I can't stress it enough. Stay woke, stay wary.